a luxurious restaurant, a moody man lashes out and slaps a young waitress across the face, completely unaware he just humiliated the owner of the entire chain. In just moments, everything is about to flip upside down, and what he thought was just a bad day out will become the worst mistake of his life. What happens next? Subscribe so you don't miss it, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Texas Reynolds sat behind her wide mahogany desk, fingers tapping lightly on the polished surface as she scanned the latest customer reviews. On paper, everything looked great. High ratings, glowing comments, nothing out of the ordinary, but Texas knew better. Numbers can lie. And behind the smiles and service, something didn't sit right. She could feel it. Her restaurants had started losing the very values she built them on: respect, dignity, and equal treatment for everyone, no matter their background. She leaned back, letting out a sigh. No matter how far she'd climbed, from growing up with a single mom in a low-income neighborhood to becoming one of the most respected names in hospitality, Texas had never forgotten what it felt like to be invisible. She knew what prejudice looked like up close, and now she was starting to see traces of that same rot inside her own empire. One sentence in a report stayed with her: staff only seemed to care about certain guests. It didn't seem like much, but for Texas, it was a red flag. So she made a decision. No meetings, no memos. She needed to see it for herself, not as the CEO, not as the boss, but as someone no one would recognize. Gone were the suits, the heels, and the designer accessories. She swapped them out for worn jeans, a plain blouse, and sneakers. Her usual phone replaced with a cheap burner. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. No longer the powerful executive, just an ordinary woman walking into a job she was expected to mess up. She chose one of her best-performing restaurants, located in the heart of the city, polished, sleek, and packed with VIP guests. As she walked in, the maitre d' gave her a thin smile, his eyes flicking over her outfit with clear disapproval. "You're the new trainee?" he asked, already half distracted. "That's right," she said softly. "Managers in the back," he muttered, turning away before she could even finish her sentence. The sting of being brushed off was real, but that was the point. She wasn't here to be treated like the CEO. In the back, she met Daniel, the shift manager. Young, polished, clearly confident around rich guests, and equally quick to dismiss anyone he saw as beneath him. He gave her a rushed overview of the job and handed her an apron like she wasn't worth more than a passing glance. "Try not to mess up," he smirked. "No one's got time to babysit." She smiled politely, keeping her cool. His arrogance only confirmed her fears. Somewhere along the way, her staff had forgotten the values she built everything on. And now, it was time to find out just how deep that problem ran. As her first shift began, Texas stayed quiet and observed. The experienced servers barely acknowledged her. Kitchen staff rolled their eyes and whispered, and what she was about to witness on that dining floor would change everything. Clearing tables, hauling heavy trays, running back and forth for water, every little task was met with side eyes, half-hidden scoffs, and muttered sarcasm. Alexis moved through it all silently, taking mental notes with every cold glance and passive-aggressive remark. The hierarchy among staff was loud without saying a word. Some walked with confidence, others barely existed, and no one cared to hide the difference. As evening fell and the restaurant buzzed with high-end clientele, the air shifted. Alexis found herself stationed at a corner table, offering her a clear view of the entire dining floor. The lighting dimmed, champagne flowed, laughter grew louder, and the polished surface of professionalism began to crack. She watched closely. Guests dripping in money were treated like royalty, their every whim met before they even had to ask. But for anyone who didn't look the part, the tone changed. Requests were delayed, smiles were tight, service was colder. The contrast wasn't blatant, but it was constant and impossible to unsee. Alexis couldn't help but reflect. She had built this empire from nothing but grit, faith, and a small loan. Her first restaurant was meant to be a place where everyone felt welcome, no matter their background. But somewhere along the way, the heart had been buried beneath profit goals and premium branding. She could still hear her mother's voice from years ago. Always treat people the way you want to be treated, Alexis. Respect is the only thing that lasts. That mantra had shaped her life, and yet now, her own business was betraying those words. By the end of the night, Daniel, the smug shift manager, walked up with the same smirk he always wore. "Not bad for your first day," he said casually. "Just try not to trip over your own feet tomorrow." She nodded and smiled, keeping her emotions locked away. But inside, her resolve was steel. As she stepped out into the night, the city lights shimmered on the glass facade of her restaurant. Hands in her pockets, she exhaled deeply. Tomorrow she'd return again, still undercover, still silent, still watching. But now it wasn't just about observation. She was on a mission to reclaim the soul of her brand, the reason she'd built any of this in the first place. And it wasn't going to be easy. The second evening started much like the first. Plain clothes, no jewelry, hair tied back. She blended in effortlessly. But tonight felt different, like something was about to shift. The restaurant looked flawless from the outside. Crystal glasses gleamed, jazz played softly, servers moved with quiet confidence. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. But beneath the surface, Alexis could feel it. The same cold dismissiveness. Her co-workers didn't even pretend to respect her. She was invisible, a rookie, disposable. They laughed behind her back and offered just enough kindness to mask their contempt. It wasn't personal, it was cultural. That was the real problem. And then, he walked in. Victor Whitmore. The name alone made everyone tense up. A longtime regular with more money than manners. He swept into the room like he owned it, every inch of his appearance screaming luxury. Hand-stitched suit, polished shoes, and that condescending smile that told the world he expected to be served, not spoken to. Staff meetings had mentioned him before. Everyone knew him. Everyone hated serving him, but they all bent over backward anyway. Alexis recognized him instantly, and she knew tonight the test wouldn't just be for her staff. It would be for her. What would Victor do when he didn't get the royal treatment he was used to? And what would Alexis do when he finally crossed the line? The answer would come faster than anyone expected, and it would shake the entire restaurant to its core. Victor Whitmore wasn't just difficult, he was impossible. Always dissatisfied, always ready with a complaint. But what truly made him stand out was something far uglier. The casual prejudice that clung to him like his designer suit. He wore arrogance like it was custom-made. The moment he walked in, a ripple of tension swept through the restaurant. Conversations died. Staff straightened up. The service pace doubled. Daniel, the shift manager, didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His glance said it all. Don't screw this up. From her corner, Alexis watched Victor scan the room like a king inspecting peasants. His eyes locked onto her, cold, calculating. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he summoned her. "Hey, you!" he called out, his voice laced with smug superiority. "You the new one?" "Yes, sir," Alexis replied calmly, keeping her voice steady. "How can I assist you?" He let out a chuckle, like her very presence was some kind of joke. "They really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, huh?" he muttered loud enough for others to hear. The insult stung, but Alexis stayed composed. Stay calm, stay focused. "Water, lemon. Don't take all night," he snapped, waving her off. As the evening progressed, Victor's behavior spiraled. He criticized her posture, her timing, how she set the plates, how she walked. Every move became ammunition for his insults. "Can you at least pretend you've done this before?" he sneered when she gently brushed the edge of his table. "Sorry, sir," she answered quietly, swallowing her pride. But his tone only grew nastier. "You really thought this job would be easy, didn't you?" he said loud enough to draw stares. "People like you don't belong here." His words cut deep, deeper than he knew. They stirred something old in her. Memories of being overlooked, written off, underestimated. She held her expression still, but inside her blood burned. Around her, the staff remained silent. Daniel stood nearby, but didn't step in. No one did. Everyone watched. No one acted. In this place, Victor was untouchable. And Alexis? As far as they were concerned, disposable. Victor kept going. He mocked the soup temperature, complained about the wine, questioned her ability to remember simple orders. Guests looked on uncomfortably but said nothing. In this polished world of quiet luxury, speaking up wasn't fashionable, even when cruelty was in plain sight. Then he leaned back in his chair, flashing a smug grin. "You should be grateful," he said. "Don't start thinking you're anything more than a server." Her grip on the tray tightened, her knuckles whitening, but still she said nothing. Not yet. And then, the moment that sealed everything. With an exaggerated motion, Victor knocked over his water glass. It spilled across the table. "Oops," he said with fake innocence. "Clean that up, sweetheart." Alexis knelt to wipe the mess, moving slowly, steadily, refusing to let him see the fury building inside her. She could feel his eyes on her, watching, enjoying her silence. Behind her, Daniel exchanged glances with another server. Still, no one moved. No one helped. Keeping Victor happy was more important than dignity. When he finally asked for the check, Alexis was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. Every second had been a quiet war, a test of self-control, and yet it had given her exactly what she came to find. Victor wasn't just a rude customer, he was a symptom. The disease was deeper. As she cleared the last plate, he offered one final smirk. "Try not to embarrass yourself next time, huh?" She smiled politely, just barely. Every muscle in her body screamed to respond, to call him out, to say something. But she didn't, not tonight. As she walked away, his laughter trailed behind her like smoke. But Alexis wasn't shaken. Not anymore. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. And when her moment came, when the truth was revealed, Victor wouldn't be laughing. Not then. By the time the main course hit the tables, Victor had reached full performance mode, sprawled back in his chair, swirling his wine like he owned the building. Every sentence he uttered oozed with contempt. Every look was a silent insult. As Alexis quietly refilled his water, he leaned in, voice smooth and venomous. "Tell me, sweetheart," he drawled, "you ever think about trying another job? Because this one clearly ain't working out for you." She held her expression, calm and neutral. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" she asked, steady as stone. Victor chuckled like her professionalism was a personal joke. "That's cute," he smirked. "But seriously, someone like you should be in a simpler place. This one's a little too polished." The jab was targeted, precise, and Alexis felt it cut deep, but she said nothing. Because that's what he wanted, a reaction, and she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. The night wore on, and Victor pushed harder. He knocked a fork onto the floor, eyes locked on her as if daring her to react. "Oops," he said, all fake innocence. "Clumsy me." Alexis knelt down, replaced it with a fresh one. Her hands were calm. Her heart wasn't. She could feel the burn building inside, but she stayed composed, still just watching, still collecting truth. Other guests noticed. Phones came out. Quiet glances exchanged. No one said a word. Then it happened. Victor leaned forward, his grin warping into something darker. He raised his voice. "You know, people like you don't belong in places like this." And then, without warning, he reached out and slapped her. It wasn't hard, but it was loud. The crack echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. The room froze. Silence fell. Chairs stilled. Utensils hung in midair. For one suspended second, time held its breath. Alexis stood there, stunned. Her cheek stung, not from pain, but from humiliation. She felt eyes on her. All of them. Guests, servers. No one moved. No one stepped in. Victor, emboldened by the silence, picked up his wine glass and threw it in her face. The cold splash hit her like a second slap. The wine soaked through her clothes, dripped down to the pristine floor. Victor sat back smugly. "There," he he said with venom. "Now you look like you belong." Still no one spoke. No one intervened. The silence was crushing, suffocating. Alexis stood drenched, heart pounding, eyes burning, but not from tears. She didn't cry. Not now. Not anymore. Memories surged of all the times she'd been ignored, dismissed, told she wasn't enough. The voices from her past returned in a single wave of shame and defiance, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not rage, clarity. Daniel finally broke the silence, stepping in awkwardly, eyes darting between Victor and Alexis. Maybe it's best if you leave," he whispered. "We don't want this to escalate." Alexis stared at him, really stared, and in that look she saw the truth. This wasn't just about Victor. The rot went deeper. The staff weren't just afraid. They were complicit, trained to protect power, even when it abused them, trained to stay silent. But not her. Not anymore. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked toward the kitchen. Behind her, she left a trail of wine-soaked footprints, every step a mark of everything wrong with this place. The dining room watched in silence. Shock, discomfort, guilt. She didn't care because something inside her had changed. Not broken, awakened. At the back of the restaurant, Alexis paused. The air smelled like butter and garlic, but it didn't soothe her. She stood still, letting every ounce of shame and fury settle into something sharper, something stronger, resolve. She wiped her face, smoothed her apron, stood taller. This wasn't the end, this was the start. And when she walked back into that dining room, she would no longer be invisible. She would be unstoppable. She wouldn't return as a trainee. She would return as Alexis Reynolds, and the world was about to remember exactly who she was. For a moment, Alexis stood still in the kitchen, her hands gripping the cold edge of the stainless steel counter. Her reflection stared back from the metal, soaked in wine, humiliated, silent. But what looked like defeat on the surface was something else entirely underneath. Not weakness, fuel. The time for silence was over. When she stepped back into the dining room, the entire restaurant turned to look. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The clinking of glasses paused. All eyes were locked on the woman they had watched get insulted and degraded moments earlier. But she didn't flinch. She walked slowly, deliberately, powerfully. Victor sat at his table, smug as ever, swirling his wine like nothing had happened. "Back for more?" he said, his tone thick with mockery. She didn't respond, not with words. Instead, Alexis calmly removed her stained apron, folded it with care, and placed it on the table in front of him. Then she looked him directly in the eye, and this time, really looked. Her voice was quiet, but carried through the room like thunder. "Let me properly introduce myself," she said. "My name is Alexis Reynolds. I'm not just a waitress. I own this restaurant, and every single one in this chain." The silence that followed was total. You could have heard a fork drop. Victor blinked, his smirk flickering, trying to process what she had just said. "What?" he stammered. "You didn't just humiliate a staff member," she said calmly. "You humiliated the owner." The color drained from his face. His swagger vanished. The room around him, the one he once owned with his arrogance, suddenly turned cold. Guests looked away. Staff stared at the floor. Daniel stood frozen by the bar, pale. The servers who once rolled their eyes at Alexis now stared in wide-eyed disbelief. They had dismissed her, sided with a bully, and now they were face to face with the consequences. Alexis turned to Daniel. "We'll be talking after close," she said, her voice cool but firm. "All of you. Every detail of what happened here." Daniel nodded, eyes low, no excuse left to offer. Victor tried to recover, letting out a weak laugh. "Come on," he said, waving his hands. "Let's not make this a scene." She didn't blink. "Oh, this isn't a scene," Alexis replied. "It's a message." Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly looking for a way out. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're going to regret this." "No," she said simply. "You will." Then she turned to the entire restaurant. "Let me make one thing clear," she said, voice rising above the silence. "As of right now, mister, Whitmore is permanently banned from every one of my establishments. He will never be welcome here again." Gasps rippled across the room. A few guests began to clap, hesitant at first, then stronger, louder. They had all seen his behavior before, and no one had ever said a word. Until now. Victor stood abruptly, face twisted in anger, but there was nowhere to direct it anymore. "You'll regret this," he snapped again, louder this time. Alexis didn't move. "I doubt that," she said, eyes steady as he stormed toward the exit. The door slammed behind him, and then the applause swelled. Not polite, not timid, powerful. She let the moment wash over her just for a second. Then, with a deep breath, she turned back to her team. The same people who had watched it all happen. They stood silently, shame written across their faces. "Things are going to change," Alexis said, her tone still calm, but now layered with resolve. "This isn't about one man or one night, it's about who we are when no one's watching, and we're going to rebuild that together." Daniel opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "Save it. After close." With that, she picked up the folded apron, turned, and walked to the back, leaving behind a restaurant forever changed. That night wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning, and it was only the beginning. The doors had closed, but the real work was just beginning. Alexis had revealed her true identity. Now came the moment of truth. Would her team be willing to follow her lead? The restaurant stood silent after the last guest left. With the doors locked, the remaining staff, including Daniel, gathered in the back, uneasy and unsure. The energy was thick with guilt and anticipation. No one wanted to speak first. They knew what was coming. At the center stood Alexis. No longer invisible, no longer underestimated. She radiated calm, unshakable authority. This was the woman who had built an empire from nothing. And now, she was about to rebuild something far more important: integrity. "Let's begin with honesty," she said, her voice steady. "What happened tonight was unacceptable, and not just because of one man's behavior, but because of how all of you responded to it." Her words hung in the air like weight. "You saw what was happening, and you did nothing. Some of you even laughed along, thinking it was easier to keep him happy than do the right thing." The room stayed silent. Daniel shifted nervously, staring at the floor. "That tells me something," Alexis continued. "It tells me we lost sight of who we are, and that's a failure I won't ignore." She paused, letting it land. "Starting tomorrow, everything changes." No one dared move. This isn't just about avoiding another Victor. It's about creating a space where everyone, guests and employees, feels respected, valued, and safe. Daniel finally broke the silence. I'm sorry," he said, voice shaky. "I didn't know what to do. I thought keeping the peace was the right move." Alexis nodded gently. "I understand, Daniel, but keeping the peace is not the same as doing the right thing. Ignoring a problem doesn't make it disappear. It makes it grow." Then she laid out the new vision. Every staff member would undergo cultural awareness and empathy training. They'd learn how to respond, not freeze, when injustice showed up. And more importantly, they'd learn how to protect each other. There'd also be a new anonymous reporting system, open to both employees and guests. No more silence, no more fear, no more impunity. "If someone like Mr. Whitmore walks through these doors again," Alexis said, "you'll know exactly how to handle it." The room was quiet, but the shift was real. Something in their faces had changed. No longer defensive, now listening. In the weeks that followed, the restaurant transformed. Alexis personally oversaw every workshop. Every employee, from the servers to the dish crew, took part in training on inclusion, respect, and real-time accountability. At first, there was resistance. But the turning point came during role-playing exercises. Staff found themselves in scenarios that mirrored what happened with Victor, and it changed them. They saw how hard it was to speak up, and how easy it was to justify silence. Daniel, more than anyone, transformed. The experience had shaken him, but also awakened him. After one session, he approached Alexis, honest and open. "I didn't see it before," he said, "but now I do. Thank you. I want to be better." Her smile was genuine. "That's all I needed to hear. Now let's make sure no one else goes through what we did." But it didn't stop with the staff. Alexis also spoke directly with guests, explaining the restaurant's new mission: equality, dignity, and zero tolerance for disrespect. To her surprise, most people embraced it. Some even shared their own stories of being treated unfairly, relieved that someone was finally listening. The new culture caught on fast. The feedback system worked. Staff felt empowered. Guests noticed the difference. The vibe shifted from cold, elite exclusivity to genuine, welcoming hospitality. The restaurant began to thrive again, not just in business but in spirit. One night, after a successful team meeting to celebrate the new program, Alexis stood before her staff. "This isn't just a restaurant," she told them. "It's a community, and you each play a role in shaping it. We're going to mess up sometimes. That's human. But if we lead with respect, empathy, and courage, we'll always find our way back." Applause erupted. This time not polite, not mandatory, earned. Alexis looked around the room and felt something deeper than pride. She felt hope, because the soul of her restaurant, what she had fought to protect all these years, had finally come back to life. Victor's cruelty hadn't broken her. It had reminded her why she built this in the first place. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, she knew they were on the right path. And this time, they'd walk it together. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. And don't stop here. Check out more of our videos for real stories with real impact, because every story holds a lesson, and the best ones are still to come. See you in the next one.